Greetings all, FerrariMan601 here. Well, why are we looking at this piece of plastic on a table? Well, this is a model that I have been putting together, just basically for the hell of it, as it were. This is a generic small block V8. Yep, 2 valves per cylinder, push rod, as you can see there with the camshaft in the middle of the V there. It's a generic Revell kit based on the typical small block V8 that you would have found in many American cars in the 1950s and 60s. And it's a quarter scale plastic kit, glues together, in some respects screws together, whatever. But it's mostly done, and it is in a somewhat workable condition. It is crank powered, of course. This little plastic crank here running to the crankshaft on the back end of the motor, the bell housing, where of course the flywheel and clutch would be on the real engine. But yeah, just thought I would briefly show this to you. I've got a couple ideas for a different model kit that I'd like to build later on in the spring and summer and show you on the channel. But yeah, just want to give you a brief look at this engine, as it were, running. It's not entirely completed yet. We have the operational valve train and everything put together. The cylinder heads are on, but of course valve covers to follow and a couple ancillary components to be run off of the front end crank pulley here, such as the alternator and engine fan. But yeah, just give you an idea of what it looks like and show you what it looks like running. Of course, I'm not really going to be able to show you everything in detail as it's running because I need to crank the thing over, but I'll show you from the side and then maybe from the front as well. But side view, of course, I've got to reach up here and hold it down somehow so I can get enough leverage to turn it over, but you can see there it is. You can at least see the left-hand bank going up and down, at least I hope you can. It's not the smoothest running thing in the world by any means, but obviously it does work, and we'll show you from the front as well. Just gotta get the best way to hold this thing without blocking your view of the front end there. And there you go, more or less. Obviously the pulley on the front there, underneath the timing cover, on the front end of the crankshaft, it's not running true because, well, it's all plastic, but you get the overall gist of how this thing would be operating. Pretty cool, I must say. No, we're not going to be doing any 20,000 RPM with this thing, but yeah, just thought you might be interested in seeing this. A quarter scale overhead valve push rod V8. And well, just a quick update. It's been about 3 weeks since the last look at this work in progress, and now it is complete, as near as complete as it's ever going to get. There were quite a few things that didn't quite work out with building this model, particularly the instructions did not quite seem to match up with what was actually in the box in quite a few circumstances, so some improvisation and some modifications had to be made. For example, the fan belt is not functional, only because the alternator here, it's behind this little flywheel here, this pulley, there's a shaft that actually runs inside the alternator. Problem is, it doesn't go all the way through the entire length of the alternator housing, so in order to make sure that the shaft stays where it should go, it needs to be fixed to this wheel, which means that when you then put this pulley on, it is fixed to the alternator. So it's not free to rotate, meaning that if you try to spin the engine over, well, it's just gonna rip this pulley out of the alternator, and then you've got to fix it. So that's no good. Additionally, you'll note that the spark wires are not quite organized in any particular way. That's basically because the instructions are pretty poorly written, and they don't tell you to thread them through the little eyelets here before you secure everything. So that's not done, so we just have some pretty bad looking spark wires. Same thing with the carburetor and the air cleaner. You can see how it's facing rearward relative to the rest of the engine. There's only one way it goes on, and there's only one way that the carburetor goes on, which means that you can't make it face forward. So we can assume that the car that this engine would have been fitted into has a ram air intake through one of those ducts at the base of the windshield. Distributor, that all went on fine. And obviously the flywheel, bell housing, and crank, that's all fine. The valves are really difficult to set. In fact, they're not set correctly. So one bank kind of works and the other bank doesn't really work at all. But aside from that, that's basically it. It's a 2-valve per cylinder push rod V8 in 1/4 scale. So, yep, that is the finished product. And yeah, it is what it is. It's not too bad, it's not too great either, but that's a model build, F-Man style. Pretty good. And the last bit, of course, we'll have to show it running to some extent, so you probably won't be able to see all that much, but you could just see one of the pistons here, and yeah, I'll try to rotate it, get an angle to rotate the thing. There we are. It's rather squeaky. In fact, it's pretty annoying, but it does run to the extent that it survives, if you can keep the crank in it. There we go. And yeah, that's basically it. Give you a look at the side there. See more of the crankshaft. So it basically, to the most minimal extent possible, does what it's supposed to do, barring the modifications to the pulley on the alternator and all of that, just to keep things in place. So yeah, unfortunately, unless I could get a shorter belt there to run between the crankshaft and the fan pulley, we don't get the fan running around as the thing's moving, but it does essentially do what it's supposed to do out of the box, despite the challenges of assembly. So definitely not the best model kit, but I got it on a pretty steep discount. I think I paid 30 bucks for it. It normally goes for 70 something, so I'll take it. For what it is, it's a cool piece, and it's not a bad little refresher in terms of teaching you how engines work in general terms. So, yeah, hopefully that was interesting, I suppose. And again, didn't really cover the whole build process because I didn't really want to. And of course, I worked on it in a pretty haphazard fashion, but it's complete now, and well, it does that. So, hopefully this was interesting for you. Ferrari Man 601 saying thank you very much for watching. And of course, we will see you soon.